Carl Jung's shocking truth: how to stop wasting your life. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung once said, reminding us that so much of what we call destiny is simply the result of living on autopilot. In this video on spiritual wisdom, we will uncover Jung's shocking truth about how to stop wasting your life and start living with intention. Ask yourself honestly, are you living fully or merely existing? As you listen, I'd love to hear your reflections. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know how you plan to apply these principles to create a life of growth, purpose, and happiness. 1. The feeling of emptiness is a signal, not a defect. That persistent sense of emptiness you sometimes feel deep inside is not a flaw in your character, nor is it simply anxiety or depression, but rather a profound message from the soul. Carl Jung taught that psychological suffering is not an illness to be silenced, but the psyche's own attempt to heal and self-correct when life strays too far from inner truth. What you mistake for weakness is in fact a signal, the soul's cry for attention, pulling you back toward authenticity and meaning. To ignore it is like shutting off a fire alarm while flames consume the house, yet to honor it is to step into the very doorway of transformation. So many men spend their years chasing status, money, or validation, hoping that external success will quiet the restless void. They pour themselves into long hours of work, endless distractions, or empty pleasures, believing that achievements will heal the silent ache within. But spiritual wisdom makes it clear that no amount of outer gain can resolve the dissonance when your outer life does not match your inner life. You can own the finest possessions, receive applause from the world, and still wake up each morning with the heavy feeling that something is missing. Because true fulfillment is born only when your actions, values, and essence are aligned. The emptiness exists to remind you that you have abandoned parts of yourself, that you are not living in harmony with your deepest truth. This is where spirituality and spiritual awakening reveal their power. For awakening does not arrive in comfort, but in the friction of pain, the hunger for truth, and the courage to face the shadow you have long denied. The numbness, the restlessness, the haunting sense of being out of place, these are not curses, but invitations. They ask you to slow down, to listen, to ask yourself difficult questions. What is this pain trying to teach me? Which part of my soul have I silenced? What truth am I refusing to live? Jung believed that confronting suffering with awareness transforms it into guidance, because pain carries the hidden key to meaning. The shocking truth is that emptiness is not here to destroy you, but to awaken you. It is the soul knocking on the door of consciousness, urging you to remember who you are and why you are here. When you reframe your suffering as a signal rather than a defect, you begin to see it as the very path back to life itself. By embracing it instead of running from it, you stop wasting your days in quiet despair and start walking toward a life where your inner world and your outer world are finally in harmony. And it is in that harmony that you find not only peace, but also the unshakable strength of living a meaningful life. If you understand that the feeling of emptiness is not a defect, but a signal for change, comment below, "I choose growth," to affirm your commitment to transformation and spiritual wisdom. 2. Medication can mask the deeper problem. Medication may silence your symptoms, but what it often does is distract you from the deeper wound, your disconnection from the authentic self. Modern society convinces you that if you are busy, you are valuable, and if you are in pain, there is always a pill to numb it. Yet beneath the noise and numbness lies a truth you cannot escape. The truth Carl Jung described when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Because in trying to escape discomfort, you may be wasting your life in ways you do not even notice. This is not to dismiss medication, for in many cases it is necessary and life-saving, but rather to challenge the illusion that symptom management equals healing. Because you and I both know a life can look functional on the surface, yet feel hollow underneath. And what makes it hollow is the lack of meaning, the absence of a why, which Viktor Frankl taught us is the very force that allows us to bear any how. When you quiet your suffering without asking what it means, you silence the messenger that came to awaken you. And Jung warned that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. So you must ask yourself, what if the very pain you are trying to escape is the door to your real life? Think of a man who works endless hours, takes medication to sleep, wakes to screens, and calls it living. His body moves, his tasks get done, but his soul feels forgotten, and that forgotten life is the costliest bill you will ever pay. Spiritual wisdom does not call you to abandon help, but to go deeper than help, to uncover the truth that the ache itself is an invitation, urging you to turn inward, to see what parts of yourself you have exiled in the name of survival, approval, or control. The shadow self, those disowned desires, hidden fears, and unlived possibilities keeps knocking at the edges of your awareness. And when you repress it, it leaks through anxiety, depression, addictions, and restless dissatisfaction. When you begin to listen to it with courage, it becomes your teacher. This is the path of spiritual awakening, not the dramatic fireworks of instant transformation, but the steady daily act of noticing, of daring to tell the truth, of keeping one small promise to yourself that affirms who you really are. It is not about grand gestures, but about realignment, about setting one boundary you have long avoided, speaking one honest sentence to someone you trust, creating one daily ritual that anchors you in presence instead of distraction, and pursuing one passion that breathes life into your days. In practice, this could mean journaling until the surface chatter quiets and the real sentences arrive, walking without headphones just to hear your own thoughts, praying in silence until your heartbeat finds its rhythm with your purpose, or seeking a wise mentor or therapist, not because you are broken, but because you deserve to be witnessed in your becoming. With each step you take, the frantic pull of distraction will begin to ease. The hollow metrics of productivity will lose their hold, and in their place will rise the quiet fulfillment of alignment. Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege is yours to claim, but only if you stop numbing and start noticing, if you stop running and start listening, if you let your pain reveal the path instead of hiding it. For when you honor your soul in this way, you no longer need endless tricks to feel alive. You awaken to the life already within you, guided by presence, meaning, and the deep assurance that your spirit truly matters. 3. Modern life is structurally soul-crushing. We are raised in a world that measures us by how much we produce rather than how deeply we live. A world that rewards conformity, achievement, and consumption while silencing the whisper of our inner voice. You know this feeling well. Your calendar fills with tasks that look important but leave you empty. Your days pass in a rhythm of meetings and deadlines that demand your presence yet ignore your essence. And little by little, you forget that life is not meant to be a performance. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, and while it helps us function in society, it becomes dangerous when it becomes our entire identity. Beneath it lies the shadow, all the truths and desires you have buried to be accepted, and beyond both is the self, your truest center, the source of meaning that calls you to awaken. Jung's timeless warning still echoes today. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When you chase careers, images, or money without listening to that inner call, you slowly trade your life for someone else's dream. And the tragedy is that you may succeed at things that never mattered to you. Picture a man in his 40s who has spent 2 decades climbing the corporate ladder, praised by colleagues, envied by neighbors, admired for his steady rise. Yet every Sunday evening, dread coils in his chest, not because of the workload, but because deep down, he knows he is living someone else's story. During a quiet train ride home, he hears a thought surface like a whisper from his soul. This is not my path. For the first time, instead of dismissing it, he writes it down. That single act of honesty becomes a seed. He begins small, declining one unnecessary meeting, carving out an hour for work that feels alive, enrolling in a night class that connects with his deeper gifts. Nothing explodes, yet everything shifts. His body feels lighter, his choices clearer, and for the first time in years, he is not merely productive, he is fulfilled. This is what spirituality in action looks like, not escaping the world, but entering it with integrity, alignment, and the courage to be true. Jung reminded us, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. An awakening begins with simple, consistent steps toward truth. You too can begin where you are. Start your mornings not with emails or notifications, but with a question. What would integrity do today? Keep a notebook where you write one honest line each night, because truth multiplies when recorded. Protect your energy with boundaries, saying no to roles that drain your soul, and yes to work that feeds your purpose. Surround yourself with people who encourage your growth rather than profit from your confusion, because community shapes character more than any paycheck. Pay attention to your body when your words say yes, but your heart contracts. That is wisdom speaking louder than logic. Let money, image, and status serve as tools, but never masters. Most of all, remember that presence matters more than performance. That life is not waiting for you somewhere in the future, but is asking for your full attention right here. When you honor this, you stop wasting your days on illusions and begin living them as sacred steps of spiritual growth. A journey where your inner voice is no longer silenced, but becomes the compass guiding you toward the person you were always meant to be. If you feel the weight of modern life, but are ready to rise above it, repeat after me. I choose to break free from the soul-crushing patterns of this world. I honor my spirit and awaken my true self today. 4. Anxiety and depression are messages from the soul. Anxiety and depression are not flaws in your character or signs that you are weak. They are urgent messages from the soul telling you that something in your life is out of balance and must change. Burnout, panic, or numbness are not malfunctions to be silenced, but warning lights that your deeper self has been ignored for too long. And as Carl Jung said, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering, meaning that when we refuse to endure the honest pain of change and truth, we invite an even heavier pain into our lives. These emotions are not random. They are a compass pointing you toward what you have denied, suppressed, or abandoned within yourself. Think of the man who has built a life of success on the outside, yet lies awake at night with a restless mind and an empty heart. His anxiety is not a curse. It is the soul's way of demanding authenticity, urging him to stop pretending and finally listen. The danger is that society teaches men to medicate these feelings, bury them under work, numb them with alcohol or distractions, and pretend that strength means silence. But the more you avoid the truth, the louder the soul cries out. Jung believed that real healing begins when you confront your shadow, those hidden fears, wounds, and unexpressed desires you have pushed away. Anxiety is the shadow knocking on your door, not to destroy you, but to lead you back to yourself. And depression is not the end, but the invitation to go deeper, to shed the false layers and awaken to who you truly are. Spirituality reminds us that every symptom carries meaning, that what feels like a breakdown can become a breakthrough if you have the courage to face it. A man who ignores these inner signals will repeat the same cycles of failed relationships, hollow victories, and unexplained anger. But a man who chooses to listen begins to rebuild his life from the inside out. He learns that suffering is not meaningless. It is purposeful, guiding him to live in alignment with his soul rather than in the prison of society's expectations. When you reframe anxiety and depression as sacred messages instead of enemies, you begin to see that they are the soul's way of pulling you out of wasting your life in avoidance and pushing you toward a spiritual awakening. And in that awakening, you discover that every fear can be transformed into fuel. Every wound can become wisdom, and every shadow you confront becomes the doorway to a more authentic and powerful life. 5. The real cure is the path of individuation. Carl Jung revealed that the real cure for wasting your life is the path of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming your true self rather than the version that society molds for you. Most people spend their days chasing approval, wealth, and recognition, yet in doing so, they lose touch with their inner truth. Individuation is about peeling away those masks and reconnecting with what is authentic within. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This is not a luxury, but a necessity, because without it, life feels shallow and empty no matter how much success you accumulate. Individuation demands that you face your unconscious, walk into the hidden corridors of your psyche, where wounds and fears live, and have the courage to bring them into the light. To walk this path, you must confront your shadow, the denied and repressed parts of yourself that you fear or refuse to accept. The shadow is not only darkness, it holds your hidden talents, your unrealized strength, and your untapped creativity. Jung warned that what you fail to make conscious will return to you as fate, meaning that your ignored inner patterns will secretly control your relationships, choices, and future until you face them. Many people live on repeat, sabotaging their happiness because they never confront these unconscious forces. Individuation breaks this cycle, freeing you to make conscious choices and live intentionally rather than blindly. This process also requires embracing the denied aspects of your personality, the anger you bury, the softness you hide, the compassion you withhold. Every suppressed part carries the key to your wholeness, and integration is the only way to feel complete. True healing does not come from pretending to be good or perfect, but from accepting the fullness of who you are, light and dark, strong and fragile, rational and emotional. Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that the path to freedom is through honesty with yourself, not conformity to others. Modern life makes this difficult. Endless scrolling, shallow comparisons, and the constant pressure to perform are all ways of running away from your inner call. Yet if you dare to listen, that call leads to a depth of life no distraction can give. Jung's truth remains shocking today because most people are not truly living. They are merely existing trapped in routine, consumed by obligations, and hypnotized by society's narrow definition of success. A wasted life is not one without possessions, but one without self-knowledge. Individuation is the antidote, awakening you to the realization that real happiness and meaning come only from alignment with your inner being. Your fate changes the moment you choose to face yourself, because the destiny of your soul is not fixed. It unfolds through your courage to explore the inner world. The journey of individuation is demanding, but it is also the most liberating path you can take, because it grants authenticity, peace, and true spiritual awakening. It is not a single achievement, but a lifelong unfolding of your essence, a daily practice of returning to who you were always meant to be. When you dare to walk this path, you discover that the greatest victory is not found in becoming what others expect, but in living as your most authentic, unapologetic, and conscious self. This is Carl Jung's shocking truth, and it is the spiritual wisdom that can keep you from ever wasting your life. If you're ready to walk the true path of individuation, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your reflections in the comments. Together, we grow in spiritual wisdom. 6. Facing the shadow is the key to wholeness. There is a hidden part of you that you often avoid, the side that holds envy, anger, and shame. And Carl Jung named this the shadow, the forgotten corner of the soul that operates in silence yet directs so much of your life. As he wrote, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people, reminding us that what we bury within will eventually shape the way we see others and the way we live. When ignored, the shadow becomes a puppeteer, pulling strings from the unconscious. But when faced and integrated, it turns into a reservoir of strength, vitality, and authenticity. Consider the story of a young woman named Sarah, who always felt resentment rise whenever her friends shared their achievements. She convinced herself she was simply being humble, yet the bitterness gnawed at her quietly, pushing her toward endless scrolling, comparing, and silently criticizing. One day, after a conversation that left her boiling with frustration, she chose to sit with her discomfort instead of running from it. And she admitted to herself that beneath the resentment was a deep longing to pursue her own dreams that she had been shelving for years. By facing this truth, Sarah uncovered that her anger was not her enemy, but a signal pointing to a neglected part of her, and that her envy was not proof of weakness, but a compass showing her what truly mattered. From that moment, she set aside time to focus on her own creative projects, began asking for help instead of waiting in silence, and discovered that when she brought awareness to her shadow, her relationships became less strained and her energy less divided. Jung reminded us, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And in this lies the power of transformation. When you stop running from your shadow, you begin reclaiming your power to choose. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the exiled potential you have not yet owned, and in it lies the raw material for growth. Envy becomes inspiration to aim higher. Anger becomes the courage to protect your boundaries, and shame becomes the humility that keeps you compassionate. Real spirituality is not about pretending to float above conflict, but about walking into life with eyes wide open, willing to meet every contradiction within you, and from that meeting, turning wounds into wisdom. The next time you feel jealousy, irritation, or insecurity rising, see them as doorways rather than obstacles, because each difficult feeling holds a message. And if you listen deeply, you transform what once sabotaged you into what strengthens you. What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size, wrote Jung, reminding us that resistance fuels the shadow, but conscious awareness liberates it. The lessons are simple, yet profound. Acknowledge what you feel instead of denying it. Ask what value or desire the feeling is pointing toward. Take one small action that honors that value and share the truth with someone you trust, so secrecy cannot feed the shame. By practicing this consistently, you stop being a victim of hidden forces and begin leading your life with clarity and wholeness. This is the essence of spirituality and the heart of spiritual growth. To love every part of yourself enough to bring it into the light, to choose responsibility over avoidance, and to transform your unconscious patterns into the conscious building blocks of a life that feels aligned, powerful, and fully your own. 7. You must reconnect with the unconscious. Carl Jung once said, "What you do not bring to consciousness returns as fate." And in that single truth lies the reason so many men feel restless, even when their lives look successful on the outside. The unconscious mind is not just a storehouse of forgotten memories, but also of unresolved traumas and hidden gifts. And when it is ignored, it leaks into your choices, your relationships, and your destiny in ways you may not see until it is too late. You may chase wealth, recognition, or distractions, but if you remain disconnected from your unconscious, you will still feel that quiet emptiness at night when everything else falls silent. Healing begins not with quick affirmations or surface fixes, but with deep introspection through your dreams, through art, through silence, and through the courage to explore what lies beneath your everyday mask. In the modern world, where noise never stops and responsibilities never end, many men push these inner whispers aside, dismissing their dreams as meaningless or their unease as weakness. Yet dreams are the language of the soul. Silence is the doorway to truth, and even the restlessness you feel is a signal that something within you is asking to be heard. Jung's warning is clear. If you do not face the unconscious, it will rule your life without your consent, and you will call it fate. Picture the man who spends decades building a career, earning respect, providing for his family, yet still lies awake at night with a sorrow he cannot name. He tries motivational slogans and positive thinking, but nothing sticks because his deeper wounds remain untouched. When he finally begins journaling his dreams, sketching the images that haunt him, and giving himself time in silence each day, he discovers not only the pain of childhood he buried, but also the creativity and passion he thought had died. By meeting his unconscious, he doesn't lose himself, he finds himself. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your greatest ally waiting to be acknowledged. Within it are not only the scars you fear, but also the strengths you need to transform your life. To reconnect with it is to stop wasting your life on illusions and start living with clarity and depth. True spirituality is not about escaping reality, but about awakening to it, making peace with your shadows, and uncovering the treasures hidden within them. When you allow silence to speak, when you honor your dreams as messages, when you open yourself to art and inner exploration, you begin to walk a path of authenticity that no amount of external success could ever replace. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, the courage to face yourself fully, and in doing so, to live a life that is no longer ruled by fate, but guided by conscious choice. If this message on reconnecting with the unconscious has inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Comment below, "I choose to reconnect with my unconscious," to affirm your journey today. 8. Fear keeps you paralyzed in an inauthentic life. Fear has a way of freezing you into a version of life that does not belong to you. A life that looks stable on the outside, but feels hollow inside. The truth is that most people avoid healing because it means walking through fear, loss, and uncertainty. Yet this avoidance only keeps them anesthetized, trapped on autopilot, and cut off from their own vitality. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," reminding us that awakening is not a painless process, but a necessary one. The pain of confronting what is hidden is the very doorway to becoming whole, and when you refuse to face that doorway, you remain paralyzed in an inauthentic life where your choices are no longer truly your own. Every time you silence the call to heal, the unconscious begins to live your life for you, shaping relationships, decisions, and even your sense of purpose. As Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The fears you bury today become the chains that quietly guide you tomorrow. Think about the times you felt numb, drifting through routines that offered no meaning. Those seasons where you were physically present but spiritually absent. You will recognize how avoidance drains your essence more than any direct confrontation ever could. Because fear, when unexamined, becomes your master. Yet spiritual wisdom teaches us that fear itself is not the enemy. It is a messenger, a signal that something important within you is asking for attention and protection. When you turn toward that fear with presence rather than running from it, the shadows begin to shrink under the light of your awareness. It is like stepping into a dark room with a lamp, where monsters dissolve into manageable shapes the moment you actually see them. Healing begins in small, practical steps, asking yourself daily what you are afraid to feel, noticing where that fear lives in your body, breathing into that space with honesty, and then naming one truth you have avoided saying aloud. The act of naming begins to loosen the chains of silence. From there, you take one courageous action, a boundary set, a conversation opened, a toxic habit released. Though anxiety may rise, let it be your signal that you are stepping from the known into the necessary. Transformation does not come in a single thunderclap, but in a steady drumbeat of small, brave choices repeated again and again. As Jung observed, what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. The energy you spend suppressing fear could be the very energy you reclaim to love more deeply, to create with passion, and to live with authenticity. If you fear that looking into the dark will extinguish your light, remember Rumi's truth. The wound is the place where the light enters you. This is not merely poetic comfort, but a profound manual for awakening. To stop wasting your life is to stop running from yourself, to choose presence over pretense, to choose responsibility over excuses, and to choose devotion over distraction. When you do, you discover that fear is not the wall it once seemed, but the door to freedom you have been circling for years. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Jung's words echo across time to remind you that awakening is not a single moment, but an ongoing practice of aligning your inner truth with your outer life. The most frightening door is the one that leads to your liberation. Yet your hand is already on the handle, waiting only for your courage to turn it. 9. Your pain is a call to awaken. Your pain is not proof that you are weak. It is a signal that your soul is asking you to pay attention, a gentle but persistent reminder that something essential is missing in the way you are living. The emptiness you sometimes feel is not failure. It is the absence of your true self in your own life. And that ache is the invitation to return to who you really are. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That means, if you keep ignoring this quiet call, you will continue to live a script written by others, drifting through roles and routines that do not belong to you. Awakening, therefore, is not about chasing dramatic change, but about choosing every day to step away from the life you have been conditioned to live and moving closer to the truth and inner purpose that already live within you. Think of how often people hide behind busyness, achievements, or distractions, only to realize that none of it feels fulfilling. A woman I once knew, admired at work for her consistency, found herself exhausted every night, scrolling endlessly just to silence the restlessness. One day, she stumbled upon the words, "Awakening means leaving behind the life you've been conditioned to live and choosing to live one aligned with your truth and inner purpose." That single line became her turning point. She didn't quit her job or abandon her responsibilities. Instead, she carved out 10 minutes every morning just for herself, writing what she valued, asking what truly mattered, and gently noticing where she was living for others instead of for her own spirit. Within weeks, she felt a shift. Her focus sharpened. Her evenings became spaces for creativity and connection, and her weekends felt alive again. Pain, once seen as her enemy, had become her teacher. Your story can unfold in the same way. Maybe your pain is pushing you to set a boundary you've been afraid to enforce, to give voice to a passion you've kept buried, or to protect your energy from things that drain you. This is what spirituality looks like in practice, not an escape from reality, but a deeper embrace of it. Jung also reminded us, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. When you look inside, you begin to see that your pain is simply pointing toward values you have neglected. The key to spiritual growth is to honor those values in small, consistent actions. Start by naming the pattern that causes your suffering, then ask yourself, which part of your truth is being silenced? Commit to one daily choice that honors it: a mindful walk, an hour for your art, a firm no to a demand that isn't yours to carry, or a ritual of prayer, journaling, or meditation that centers you. At the end of each day, reflect on what felt alive and what felt empty, and share your truth with someone you trust, because healing magnifies when mirrored by another soul. Do not complicate the path, because growth is not a performance. It is a steady practice of alignment, and the soul speaks most clearly through these quiet, consistent acts. You are not late. You are not lost. You are not destined to wander without meaning. Life changes the moment you claim ownership of your attention and begin to protect the conditions that allow your spirit to breathe. Let your pain be a doorway instead of a sentence. Remember these truths. Your pain carries wisdom, not shame. Your values are your map. Your daily choices are the engine of change. Reflection is your compass, and connection with others is your anchor. Hold close the reminder that emptiness is not weakness. It is simply the soul waiting to return, and that awakening means leaving behind the conditioning of the world to live aligned with your deepest truth and your inner purpose. 10. Real transformation is painful, but worth it. Real transformation is never a smooth or easy path, because it asks you to let go of the masks, the comforts, and the shallow habits that once made you feel safe. Yet those very sacrifices open the doorway to true freedom, authenticity, and peace. As Carl Jung reminds us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and that privilege is not handed out cheaply. It demands courage, honesty, and the willingness to face discomfort head-on. The journey is filled with resistance at first, sleepless nights, the sting of giving up distractions, the awkwardness of saying no where you once said yes, the loneliness of stepping away from shallow approval. But this struggle is not punishment. It is preparation, shaping you into a man who can stand in his own truth without crumbling under pressure. When you decide to embrace spirituality and step into spiritual awakening, you begin to notice how much of your energy was wasted on things that never mattered. Every moment you spent comparing yourself to others, every hour you numbed your feelings with scrolling or drinking, every day you postponed the hard conversation. These were fragments of your life slipping away. Transformation calls you to reclaim them. It may begin with something as simple as sitting quietly for 10 minutes each morning, writing down the truths you can no longer ignore, or admitting to someone close to you that you've been hiding behind anger or fear. These small acts of honesty, repeated over time, build a bridge between the man you pretend to be and the man you truly are. And though each step costs you comfort, convenience, and even the approval of those who like the old version of you, the reward is far greater. Dignity, clarity, and a deep sense of inner freedom that no one can take away. This is not a theoretical promise, but a lived reality. Many men in midlife find themselves with the title, the house, and the routine, yet with an emptiness they cannot name. Only when life delivers a jolt, a health scare, a broken relationship, or a crisis of meaning do they realize the cost of delay. But you do not have to wait for catastrophe to wake up. You can choose today to practice courage in small, steady ways, to face the shadow you've avoided, to release the soft addictions that dull your spirit, to protect your energy like a precious resource. Each choice rewires your life toward purpose. Each sacrifice carves space for peace. And each honest act calls you deeper into the man you were meant to become. The truth is simple but demanding. The painful road of transformation is the only one that leads to lasting freedom. And the more you walk it, the more you discover that the pain was never wasted. It was the price of becoming real. So as we've explored in today's video, Carl Jung reminds us that life becomes wasted when we live unconsciously, repeating old patterns and ignoring the deeper call of our soul. True meaning and happiness come when we awaken, confront our inner truths, and choose a life that aligns with who we really are. At Spiritual Wisdom, our mission is to guide you toward that awakening. Now, I want to hear from you. What is one step you're ready to take today to stop wasting your life and start living with intention? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your journey might just inspire someone else's. And if this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more wisdom that can transform your life. Carl Jung's final warning. Empaths were once children who were never allowed to be selfish. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, said Carl Jung, reminding us that real growth begins when we reclaim the parts of ourselves we were once forced to hide. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll uncover Jung's final warning about empaths, why those who feel so deeply are often carrying the wounds of a childhood where they were never allowed to be selfish. As you listen, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey. Have you ever silenced your needs just to keep the peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story may inspire someone else. Let's dive in and explore how applying these principles can lead to greater self-awareness, healing, and happiness in your daily life. 1. Childhood roots of empathy. As children, many empaths were never allowed the freedom to simply exist as themselves. They weren't permitted to be loud, needy, selfish, or unapologetically authentic. Instead, their safety depended on silencing their own desires and tuning into the unspoken moods of those around them. A glance, a sigh, or a sudden shift in the atmosphere of the home became signals they had to decode long before they even had words for their feelings. Empathy, in this sense, was not born as a natural gift, but as a shield, an instinctive form of survival programming that kept them safe in unstable emotional environments. In those formative years, the empath child was forced to sacrifice spontaneity and self-expression, becoming what Jung described as the family emotional barometer, a being who could sense storms before they struck, but who paid the price of never knowing the freedom to be fully human. This role as an emotional barometer created a state of constant hypervigilance. Instead of laughing, playing, or simply making mistakes like other children, they grew up as silent observers, monitoring every fluctuation in mood, every shadow of anger, every drop of sorrow that moved through the household. They learned to adjust themselves to maintain harmony, to disappear when tensions rose, and to carry the weight of emotional responsibility that was never theirs to bear. Their heightened sensitivity, while extraordinary, came at the cost of their own identity. They grew into adults who continued to absorb pain almost compulsively, who felt responsible for easing suffering, and who struggled to separate where others ended and they began. Jung did not see this as weakness or brokenness, but as an unfinished journey. He believed that what many call empathy is actually the halfway point in the deeper psychological process of individuation, the lifelong task of becoming whole. For the empath, individuation begins when they recognize that their sensitivity was not purely a divine blessing of spirituality, but also the wisdom of survival learned in childhood. This recognition becomes the spark of spiritual awakening. It allows them to shift from unconscious programming into conscious choice, no longer bound by the compulsion to rescue or absorb the wounds of others. They begin to ask themselves questions that were once forbidden. What do I feel? What do I need? What does my soul long for? The challenge for the empath is to transform this survival pattern into a conscious gift. It requires honoring the past without letting it dictate the future, and reclaiming the right to exist fully without apology. The child, who was never allowed to be selfish, must now discover the sacred act of selfhood, choosing boundaries, respecting their own needs, and understanding that compassion without balance drains the soul. When empathy is rooted in self-respect, it becomes medicine rather than burden, a light that heals without consuming its source. This is the essence of Jung's insight, that empaths, by facing the truth of their origins, can transmute survival into strength, hypervigilance into wisdom, and wounded sensitivity into conscious love. Spirituality, at its deepest level, asks us not to escape our wounds, but to integrate them. True spiritual awakening is not the denial of pain, but the transformation of it into clarity and wholeness. For the empath, this means embracing the forgotten child within, the one who learned to survive by disappearing, and offering them the love, freedom, and voice they were once denied. Only then can empathy evolve from unconscious reaction into conscious power. And only then can the empath step into the fullness of who they truly are. Comment below, "I honor my childhood truth," if you're ready to heal the roots of your empathy and embrace Carl Jung's final warning with deeper spiritual wisdom. 2. Loss of authentic self. In survival mode, when a child learns that love, safety, and acceptance depend on silencing their own needs, the first thing to vanish is the authentic self. Because to keep peace, they suppress what Carl Jung called healthy selfishness, that natural ability to advocate for oneself, draw boundaries, and say no without guilt. Instead of growing up believing that their needs are valid, they are conditioned to put everyone else first, interpreting their own desires as dangerous, their feelings as excessive, and their self-expression as something that must be carefully hidden. Over time, this survival strategy becomes an identity, and as adults, they may carry a subtle but painful belief that their worth is tied to how much they can serve, absorb, or sacrifice. Jung warned that this is where the empathic paradox is born. You can become so deeply attuned to others that you lose connection with yourself. It looks like compassion, but underneath is disconnection, because while you can sense everyone else's pain, you struggle to recognize or honor your own. This empathic paradox explains why many empaths feel drained, confused, and even resentful, yet keep giving more. They have been trained to see self-care as selfishness, when in truth, it is the foundation of well-being. Spirituality and spiritual development remind us that love that demands self-erasure is not real love, and service that costs your wholeness is not true service. The journey forward requires reclaiming that healthy selfishness as sacred ground, the courage to say no without apology, the wisdom to rest without guilt, and the dignity to treat your own needs as legitimate. Jung did not see empaths as broken. He saw them as partway through the process of individuation, the spiritual and psychological journey toward becoming whole. Your empathy is not a flaw, but a gift that must be balanced with self-awareness, because true compassion cannot exist without self-respect. This process of spiritual development is not about abandoning your sensitivity, but learning to root it in your authentic self. That means asking simple but powerful questions each day. What do I feel? What do I need? What choice honors me? It means noticing the tightening in your chest as a signal of overextension, or the fatigue in your body as a call to pause. It means replacing the compulsion to fix with the choice to witness, remembering that not every burden is yours to carry. It means creating replenishment rituals: sleep, nourishment, silence, creativity, because without them, your empathy becomes extraction instead of expression. And above all, it means practicing boundaries, not as rejection of others, but as protection of your wholeness, which in turn allows you to give authentically. From this place, new lessons emerge. Redefine healthy selfishness as self-respect in action, a practice of honoring your soul's rhythm. Replace over-explaining with clear, kind truth, because your no is a complete sentence. Stop measuring your goodness by endurance and begin measuring your growth by how well you honor your limits. Ask yourself, is this mine to hold? Before taking on someone else's pain. Schedule weekly time just for yourself and protect it as fiercely as you would for someone you love. Keep a record of small victories where you chose yourself, because those moments rebuild trust in your inner voice. Sensitivity guided by wisdom becomes a strength, not a weakness, and spirituality grounded in choice becomes a compass that brings you back to your authentic self. When you allow yourself to be whole, your empathy no longer depletes you. It flows outward as a gift rooted in truth. 3. The shadow and forbidden selfishness. The empath's shadow is not filled with flaws, but with everything that was once silenced, anger that was never allowed to be voiced, needs that were dismissed, boundaries that were ignored, and self-respect that was labeled selfish. Carl Jung, with his intelligence and spiritual wisdom, saw these not as weaknesses, but as essential missing pieces of wholeness. What was repressed becomes the key to individuation, the process of becoming whole. When you deny your shadow, you deny the very fuel that makes your empathy authentic and strong. Without reclaiming this forbidden selfishness, the empath becomes the wounded healer, always pouring into others, yet secretly empty, offering compassion that slowly turns into resentment. As children, many empaths learned that love was conditional, that safety came only when they disappeared for others, and that their value was tied to service. Out of survival, they sacrificed authenticity and built their identity around healing and caretaking. This is why their empathy often feels less like a gift and more like a weight. Jung's warning was clear. Empathy rooted in self-denial is not a spiritual blessing, but survival programming. To continue on this path is to exhaust yourself endlessly, mistaking self-erasure for compassion. Rumi once wrote, "Do not get lost in your pain. Know that one day your pain will become your cure." For empaths, that cure begins when they step into the shadows and reclaim what was forbidden. The right to take up space, the right to say no, the right to feel anger and honor their own needs. Spiritual wisdom teaches that true compassion does not grow from emptiness, but from fullness. A tree that never drinks water cannot offer shade for long. In the same way, an empath who never nourishes their own soul cannot sustain their gift of empathy. Individuation, Jung's path to wholeness, requires balance of light and shadow, giving and receiving, selflessness and selfishness. To embrace the shadow is to realize that protecting your peace is not selfishness, but intelligence. That respecting your limits is not cruelty, but wisdom. And that honoring your needs is not weakness, but strength. The transformation begins when the empath understands that the shadow is not an enemy, but a missing ally. To integrate those suppressed parts is to rise from wounded healer to wise guide, no longer giving from depletion, but from overflow. Empathy then becomes powerful, clear, and sustainable, rooted not in fear of rejection, but in the deep knowing that you are as deserving of love and care as those you serve. And only when you restore yourself to wholeness can your empathy shift from survival to sacred purpose, from compulsion to choice, from burden to true gift. Have you ever allowed yourself to embrace a moment of healthy selfishness without guilt? If yes, share your experience in the comments so others can learn from your journey. If not, simply comment, "I will try," and take the first step toward reclaiming your shadow in a balanced way. 4. The crisis of individuation. Burnout for empaths is not simply fatigue. It is the body, mind, and spirit demanding a deeper truth, the undeniable signal that the path of endless giving has reached its limit. Carl Jung described this as the individuation imperative, the psyche's inner law that insists every person must become authentic rather than live trapped in survival roles. For the empath, survival once meant silencing their own needs to meet the needs of others, shaping themselves into caretakers whose value seemed tied to how much pain they could absorb. What looked like compassion was often a spiritual mask, an identity built from childhood lessons that their feelings were too loud, their desires too much, and their worth conditional on serving others. Over time, this survival pattern creates exhaustion, resentment, and a haunting emptiness, a loss of meaning in caring for others while the self withers away unseen. When this moment arrives, society rarely offers support. The empath's quiet rebellion, saying no where they once said yes, stepping back where they once rushed in, is often labeled as selfishness. Those who benefited from their self-abandonment may resist the change, accusing them of losing kindness or betraying their true nature. Yet this judgment only reveals how little others understand the sacred process unfolding. Spirituality teaches us that transformation often looks like destruction from the outside, but within, something powerful is being born. Jung insisted that the call to individuation is not a rejection of love, but the awakening of it, because only by becoming whole can one offer genuine, life-giving compassion rather than drained obligation. To embrace this path is to step into spiritual awakening, to honor the divine spark that was never meant to be extinguished in endless sacrifice. The crisis of individuation is not the end of the empath's story. It is the hidden doorway to their real beginning. Resentment and fatigue are not signs of weakness, but of evolution. The psyche's insistence that life cannot continue in disguise. As Jung reminded us, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. To look inside is to confront the painful truth that much of what was called empathy was in fact survival programming. And yet to awaken is to see that this same gift can be reborn in balance, in wholeness, in authenticity. By daring to reclaim their energy, by protecting their own spirit, the empath does not diminish their love for the world. They deepen it, transform it, and finally allow it to flow without resentment or depletion. This is the higher purpose hidden within the struggle, the intelligence of the soul, urging them to stop surviving and start truly living. 5. Sacred selfishness and integration. Carl Jung spoke of sacred selfishness, a principle that calls you to honor yourself while still walking in compassion. Sacred selfishness is not about neglecting others or falling into cold self-interest. It is about learning to respect your own boundaries, to recognize the legitimacy of your needs, and to claim emotional sovereignty as a foundation for spiritual development. For too long, empaths have been conditioned to believe that love must be earned through sacrifice, that their value rests in pouring out endlessly for others while ignoring their own soul. But true growth does not come from abandoning empathy. It comes from balancing care for others with care for yourself, because spirituality is integration, and integration cannot flourish if one part of you is always denied. To embody this balance, Jung described practices that shift empathy from survival into conscious choice. Emotional choice means you no longer allow yourself to be swept away by every tide of suffering, but instead decide when and how to enter into another's feelings. This choice is not indifference. It is strength, because it allows you to give without losing yourself. Compassionate detachment follows, the ability to care deeply without absorbing another's pain as if it were your own. You remain present. You stand with others in their struggle, yet you protect your light from being extinguished by their darkness. Then comes the practice of reciprocal relationships, where giving and receiving are equal and energy flows in balance. Without reciprocity, empaths often collapse under the weight of one-sided connections, but with it, both souls are nourished and strengthened. When these practices take root, empathy transforms into a conscious gift rather than a burden. You are no longer the child who was never allowed to be selfish, but the awakened adult who understands that self-love and love for others must exist together. Spiritual awakening begins when you accept that your own needs are sacred, and that by honoring them, you honor the divine within you. Jung's reminder, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, becomes your guiding light, showing you that your boundaries are not walls, but gateways to authenticity. Sacred selfishness teaches that caring for yourself is not weakness, but wisdom, not selfishness, but responsibility, because without it, your compassion cannot sustain itself. When you choose emotional freedom, practice compassionate detachment, and cultivate reciprocal relationships, you rise into wholeness, your spirituality deepens, and your empathy becomes not a wound from the past, but a radiant force for healing, balance, and strength. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss insights like this on sacred selfishness and integration. Comment below. I embrace my sacred self to affirm your journey toward balance and wholeness. 6. Transformation of relationships. When empaths begin to reclaim themselves, every relationship around them shifts because they no longer operate from the old wound of self-abandonment that once shaped their lives. Carl Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And the moment an empath honors their own needs instead of silencing them, connections recalibrate. Relationships built on silence, overgiving, and the unspoken demand to disappear so others could thrive naturally fall away. Yet this is not loss, but liberation, a clearing that makes room for bonds rooted in authenticity, respect, and mutual care. As children who were never allowed to be selfish, empaths developed survival strategies that looked like compassion, but were, in truth, a way of staying safe. Their intelligence sharpened, their sensitivity deepened, and they became masters at anticipating emotions, offering spiritual wisdom to others before ever learning to nourish themselves. That was not spirituality, but strategy, a coping mechanism in a world that told them their feelings were too much. Reclaiming the self requires individuation, Jung's path toward wholeness, which demands courage to break free from unconscious patterns and embrace relational selectivity, the clarity to see who deserves access to your empathy and who only drains it. Relational selectivity is not cruelty, but psychological intelligence. It is the discipline to ask, who still values me when I say no? Who respects my boundaries as much as I respect theirs? Who supports me without requiring my constant sacrifice? Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For empaths, this truth means that unless they confront the compulsion to overgive, they will remain trapped in cycles of imbalance, mistaking depletion for love. But with awareness, they shift from being consumed by others to creating equal exchanges, where empathy becomes a two-way current of love and truth. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, moving from dependency to authenticity, from sacrifice to balance. Some people will resist this evolution because they were attached to the version of you that served their needs, but others will step forward, drawn to the strength of your wholeness. Friendships and partnerships that remain will no longer require your silence, but will celebrate your voice. This is Jung's final warning. Empaths cannot heal the world by dissolving into it. They must first heal themselves, claim their right to exist fully, and guard their sacred compassion with discernment. Your empathy is not for everyone. Your energy is sacred. What falls away was never aligned with your true self, and what emerges will honor your light. This is not selfishness, but authenticity, the highest form of love, where you honor yourself so deeply that only those who respect, value, and love the real you are allowed to stay. 7. Becoming the integrated empath. Integration means empathy is no longer a reflex born from fear or a desperate attempt to earn love, but a conscious choice flowing from inner strength. When you no longer give because you feel you must, but because you decide to, your sensitivity transforms into a powerful form of intelligence, a sacred expression of spiritual wisdom. What once felt like a weakness becomes the foundation of your strength, and what was once survival becomes a conscious spiritual gift. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires us to reclaim what was denied in childhood. And for empaths, this means restoring the right to boundaries, to self-respect, and to honoring their own needs without shame. Only then does empathy stop being a compulsion that drains life and instead become a deliberate offering that empowers both giver and receiver. This transformation marks the shift from being consumed by the emotions of others to standing rooted in your own presence, choosing when to extend compassion and when to protect your spirit. It is here that spirituality and psychology meet. For spiritual awakening is not about erasing the self, but about strengthening it so compassion can flow authentically. The integrated empath embodies psychological sovereignty, living in truth rather than sacrifice, offering kindness without losing themselves. Like a tree that offers shade without uprooting its roots, they extend love while remaining grounded, able to hold space for others without collapsing under their weight. Such sovereignty allows sensitivity to be expressed as clarity and calmness, no longer chaotic or overwhelming, but radiant and steady. True compassion is no longer rescuing others at the expense of your soul, but standing firm in your own light and letting that light inspire healing. Jung's wisdom reminds us that unintegrated empathy traps you in patterns of self-erasure, but integrated empathy liberates you into wholeness, turning pain into power and silence into voice. When empathy becomes a conscious choice, you embody both openness and strength, both love and self-protection, and your very presence becomes a sanctuary, healing for others, yet safe for yourself. To honor your journey of becoming the integrated empath, take a moment to affirm your growth. Comment below, "I walk boldly integrated," as a declaration of your courage and to inspire others to embrace their own path of wholeness. And so, Carl Jung's final warning reminds us that what we often call empathy is sometimes the survival pattern of a child who was never allowed to have needs of their own. The journey now is not about staying trapped in that old story, but about reclaiming your wholeness and learning that self-care is not selfish, it is sacred. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos, filled with insights to guide your own awakening.